Hey everyone, welcome to another edition of Power Core Productions and Podcastings. I'm your host, Javon Harrington, back to hit you with another video. First and foremost, I want to say happy Thanksgiving or happy holidays to anyone in particular, as by the time you listen to this video, it will be on Thanksgiving Day, and I hope all of you are enjoying your holidays safely. But we're going to be continuing today's video, that being High School DxD Fallen Hero, What If Issei Was the Blue Beetle, Season 1, Part 3. As always, if you're new to the channel, or if you're a regular and you like what we have to offer, then please don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, share, and hit that bell for post notifications so you can stay up to date on everything that is Power Core Productions and Podcasting that has to come out now and in the future. I do want to make one brief announcement before we start today's video, and that is that as far as the story for High School DxD and for Date Alive, we are only going to be doing Season 1, and we are not going to be covering Season 2 during the events of Phase 1. And the reason being is that in a few weeks, I originally planned on going on a vacation for the last 2 weeks of December. And I'm going to have to take a little bit more time off because I'm going to be getting some dental work done. So my mouth is going to be in a lot of pain and I will not be able to record for a while. And also, I don't want to burn through all of the content that I want to make. I do want to take some time to make preparations before I go into Season 2 of High School DxD Fallen Hero and for Date Alive Flash in Time Season 2, respectively. So we're not going to be doing Season 2 for either of these series. We're going to be wrapping up their Season 1s next week. And then we're just going to be focusing on wrapping up the Naruto Green Lantern story and Naruto Polaris. So once we wrap up those, then I'll be out for the rest of the year. I just want to let you know in advance, again, it's just going to be working out for the bestest way because there are some personal things that I need to take care of, and I really just need a break to try to recharge before we get into the all-in-alls for Phase 2. Anyway, thank you in advance, and now let's get into today's video. So as always, sit back, relax, and enjoy the show. Following their battle with Rainier, Asuya would adjust to her new life in the House of Grimmery, having been reborn as a devil. Of course, Asuya had no ill will against them. Despite the preconceived notions for those who worked in the church, Asuya was a kind and forgiving soul. Also, the fact of the matter was that she had been betrayed by those she had been trying to serve, so there wasn't really too big of a deal on her end when it came to switching sides. Although her one regret was that she'd never be able to pray as freely as she wanted to. In fact, every time she did, she suffered great headaches. She would ask if there were any way to bypass this, but Rias would explain that since they were devils, trying to get a prayer off was easier said than done. And then there was the matter of Rachel and where she fit into all of this. There was also learning more of her backstory and where she had come from. This was something that Asuya could play along in as well. Now, as far as Rachel's, or as you know her, Raven's backstory, it's the same as it is in canon. Although, once she found herself on her own, she would move from foster home to foster home, even spending a brief time in the same monastery as Asuya, although she would find herself leaving not before long. The fact that Rachel and Asuya have found one another once again was truly a miracle, and while she didn't express it out loud, she was happy to see her old friend once again. The two girls were opposite in personality, Asuya being bright and hopeful while Rachel was closed off and reserved. Of course though, Rachel's main concern was trying to keep a low profile. Issei wondered why this was, and he wondered just what was the big deal about Rachel. Even if her father was the mysterious and powerful Trigon, one of the ancient Devil Kings, it wasn't like Rachel had anything to do with it. However, Rias would explain that the political world of the underworld was a lot more complicated than one might think. It wasn't just a matter of people going around fighting for territory or power. No, the four kings had already been established and the rule was rather peaceful. The problem came in detractors. There were those who didn't agree with the current system and believed that those from the older lineage should be in charge. And the simple fact of the matter was that Rachel was a direct descendant of one of the ancient leaders. Because of this, she could be seen as a martyr of sorts, or she could be used as the figurehead to spew some type of campaign against those currently in rulership. This could cause civil war and unrest. Not to mention, there was the potential of Rachel's unstable power and the possibility that Trigon could escape where he had been sealed away, and using her body as a conduit could bring himself back into their world. And once he did so, that could spell the end of days for everyone. So of course, wherever Rachel landed, wherever she joined her allegiance, that could play a crucial role in the fate of everything that they knew. It was because of this that she was often hunted down by various groups and factions who were looking to have their own gains. And it was the reason why Rachel was always keeping herself guarded. In fact, it's the reason why she didn't outright accept membership into the House of Grimmery. Of course, Rias only wanted what was best for Rachel. Genuinely speaking, she didn't want there to be any cause of strife or for concern. And if there was a way to keep peace, she wanted that. But that was easier said than done. Also, it could be looked as the House of Grimmery trying to gain unnecessary power. There were a lot of tricky things involved. But ultimately, it all depended on Rachel and her decisions. For now, she didn't want to join any faction or group. Although, if the House of Grimmery were going to keep their word and watch over her, to keep her from having to look over her shoulder every 5 minutes, then she appreciated this. And also, it allowed her to spend time with Asya, so that was also a benefit as well. Of course, for Issei in the meanwhile, aside from his own daily fantasies and dreams, there was still the mystery of the scarab that was on his back. Of course, the group had tried to give him as much information as they could, but the simple fact of the matter was that the scarab was one of the more rare sacred gears, and it was one that was fewer hard to find. Issei asked if there were any other rare sacred gears out there in the world, but the two that came to mind were the powers of the Red Boosted Gear, or the Red Dragon Emperor, and that of the Vanishing White Dragon Emperor. Of course, these were the powers of legend, but they hadn't been seen, at least as far as Rias and the others were concerned, although there were rumors that the White Dragon Emperor had made his emergence. Issei wondered about the Red Dragon Emperor, and Rias would guess that the Red Dragon, if it were to emerge, wouldn't be too far behind. Although who would have it, she had no idea. It could be anyone in the world or anyone from another place of existence, for all she knew. Of course, Issei wondered where his powers stacked up in the grand scheme of things. And Akeno would explain that Issei's power was unique in and of itself. The power of the blue beetle, the scarab. It was one that had a lot of potential, depending on how Issei could unlock it. However, unlocking was easier said than done, primarily because of the fact that the scarab did not get along with Issei well. It mainly came in the form of indifference. The scarab would only speak to Issei when it wanted to speak, or whenever it had a snide remark. It made itself very clear that it did not value Issei as a partner at all, and whatever power Issei gained from the scarab, it had to be by its own effort. It wasn't going to give him any freebies or handouts. This only made Issei's attempted training all the more frustrating. Even so, Rachel would offer some insight. I don't get it. The stupid thing doesn't want to work with me at all. It's like it's just rebelling for no reason. Have you ever considered that maybe you don't give it a reason to respect you? What's that supposed to mean? Well, no offense, Issei, but you're a pervert. And pretty much you live to be a pervert. You're talking about an ancient powerful weapon. Something that was used to fight with honor and with dignity. And now it's attached itself to a teen with nothing but angst and high hormones. I mean, that thing was attached to warriors. Men who actually fought and had something that was worth believing in. And no offense, but trying to become a harem king isn't really a worthwhile goal when it comes to something of that magnitude. So what? Because I don't have some high and almighty dream or purpose I'm not worth respecting? That's not it necessarily. The problem is that you don't give it anything to respect. It sees you as a child and treats you as such. If what you've said is true, that thing has no problem being reborn into someone else. Meaning that unless you actually gain its trust and respect, you're pretty much going to be fumbling around on your own. Issei didn't really like that comment all that much, although deep down a part of him knew that it was true. It didn't have to be a grand secret to be revealed for Issei to know this about himself. He knew he wasn't some righteous guy. He knew he didn't have some altruistic goal or dream or ambition. He wasn't trying to be the world's greatest hero or warrior. He wasn't trying to do any of that. Heck, not too long ago, he didn't even know any of this stuff even existed. And, as he stated out time and time again, he didn't choose this lifestyle. This lifestyle seemingly chose him. The only thing he could do now was make the best of the situation that he was in. And it seemed as though the one thing he was supposed to be working with wasn't giving him any leeway at all. For the most part, Issei could only use a partial deployment. That being that his arms would be coated in the blue and black armor, and he could make the weapons from that. And his body had a natural increased strength, speed, and a boost to his stamina. There was also the dealing of how many pawn pieces he had received from Rias. Rias would explain that the pawns that she had used to bring Issei back to life was a strenuous technique and it took a lot of effort. In fact, she was only able to give Issei 6 pawns in total, instead of the entire 8 that she originally planned to. Of course, she had her own theories as to why. The Beetle only has 6 legs, so that maybe had something to do with that specific number, in the fact that he could only take in 6 pawns. Once again, it seemed like the scarab was screwing him over in some way, shape, or form. But Rias would explain that that wasn't too much of a bad thing. The fact that he was able to take in 6 pawns was more than impressive. And she still had more pieces left to use in otherwise, so she could grow her household in other ways if need be. Of course though, Issei wished that he could have been better. As far as his training was concerned, he could make a few basic weapons, a sword, a shield, and a plasma cannon for some reason. Of course though, even though he could make the weapons and he had the decent body type, it was his fighting skills that needed the most effort, but Issei figured he could just gain that in due time. There was also the issue of getting the newest members of the House of Grimmery their own familiars. In the course of doing so, Asuya would find herself being partnered with a sprite dragon that she would name Rase, in honor of Issei, of course. And even though Raven wasn't a member of the House of Grimmery, if she wanted a familiar, Rias would allow it. As Rachel would go about trying to find a familiar of her own, surprisingly enough, she would find one that suited her. A black bird. A raven, if you will. This raven was special in particular, as the raven had the capabilities of giving insight, or the eyes of its master could see whatever the raven saw. Of course, Rachel felt a natural bond to it, and Asya would remark that her nickname was Raven after all, causing Rachel to blush a bit as she didn't like using that nickname or throwing it around as much. But yeah, she did go by the name Raven, and she decided that taking this Raven in would do her some good. Of course, there was the matter of naming the Raven, and she decided to settle on the name Ruth. Ruth would be a good name for her. Where she had come up with that name, she wasn't entirely sure, but Ruth was something that worked best for it. Ruth the Raven. And Asya would have her dragon. All in all, Rias was happy with how well her household was growing. Even Issei was managing to be somewhat competent. He had actually managed to form a contract. It wasn't anything of great note, but still, he was being consistent, so that was a bit of a bonus. Although, Rias was dealing with some issues of her own though. Issei seemed to pick up on this, and one evening, as everyone was being let out to go home, he would ask her if something were bothering her. Rias would try to play it off, but she would ask Issei a serious question. What did he think about true love? If it were real, or if it were something that were worth attaining? Issei wasn't sure of where this question came from, but he would give his best answer. For Issei, he believed that you should be with whoever makes you happy. No point settling down into something that doesn't suit you. In the end, no one wins in that situation. Although he wasn't really one to talk, the one time he thought he had found true love, it resulted in him being betrayed, stabbed multiple times, and left for dead. And to make matters worse, whatever ancient power he had been summoned to, the thing that could have saved his life, was willing to let him die. So, he kind of had a warped view of relationships. Although for Rias, she kind of did echo in that same sentiment. She too wanted to know if having true love, if having something that was genuine could even be possible. For now though, she felt that she were happy with what Issei had told her, and she was grateful to have someone that was honest. Issei would bid Rias goodnight, and would leave to go to his home. Since Asya had nowhere to stay, it was decided that she would live with Issei at his house. And not just Asya, but Rachel as well, since apparently she had been living on her own all this time and Rias thought she could use a stable home life. So now Issei was living in a house with two pretty smoking hot girls, to say the least. Not that anything ever went anywhere. No, Issei wasn't going to go that far, but his imagination certainly could. And his imagination was running wild as he laid in his bed on that night. However, his imagination would soon take a dramatic turn, as a red summoning circle would appear. Issei would then be startled. However, the scarab would tell him to calm down, as it seemed as though the leader had arrived. The leader? What are you talking about? You idiot. It's the red-haired girl. Oh, Rias? Issei looked over to see Rias had arrived to his room, with a serious look on her face. As she walked over to Issei's bed, she implored him, looking into his eyes desperately, as she asked him for a very important favor: to take away her innocence. Or, as Issei would describe it, to do the do. And this left Issei more perplexed and confused than he had ever been. There comes a point in every boy's life when he has to make a crucial decision. When he has to decide if he's going to stand up to the plate or shrivel back in fear. For Issei, that moment had finally come. The moment where it was time to either raise the flagpole and stand in attention or fall to the wayside. Was it time to hit the home run or was it time to go back to the dugout? You're probably wondering why I'm using all these puns and metaphors, but for obvious reasons, I can't go into full detail about what could or couldn't have happened. Now granted, there are a lot of speculation, a lot of things that you may or may not consider. Heck, if you were in this situation, you probably would have made a different choice as well. But the one thing that Issei always understood, the one thing Issei always knew, was that he was a young man with burning passion and desire. And he made that very clear, as stated in his goals, his affirmation, what he lived by. But at the same time, Issei knew that he was also someone of integrity. And the last thing he'd ever want is to take advantage of someone under duress. Even though Rias seemed like she wanted, like it was something that she desired, Issei could tell within his own heart, she wasn't really into this. This was like something that was being done out of obligation, not true feeling. Sure, under normal circumstances, Issei welcomed the idea of rolling in the double Ds, but not like this. While Rias tried to be aggressive, Issei would calm her down, getting her to try to be rational, knowing that she'd never do anything without thinking straight. For Rias, she was almost surprised, truly shocked. Of all people, she figured Issei would be the most willing to comply. In fact, she kind of figured that he would have just thrown himself into the act without a care in the world. On one hand, she actually appreciated him for not going through with it, for actually having the fortitude to think. Sure, he might have been a major pervert almost all of the time, but the fact that he could show a level of restraint to this degree, it made her heart skip a beat for a moment. That genuineness that she was looking for. In this act, as much as you might think it was small, it didn't go unnoticed by another one among them, although he kept himself silent. As Rias was coming to her senses, another being would show up in the room. An older woman, with long silver hair, dressed like that of a maid or a servant. She would address Rias Grimmy formally, and ask for her not to do anything indecent. Rias would address the woman as Graphia, and she would explain that she had done nothing of the sort, and she were merely consulting with one of her servants. Relieved that nothing had taken place, Graphia would get Rias back into her clothes and explain that they had somewhere they needed to be, and they were going to have to make it swift. Of course, Rias knew all too well what this was about, and she would thank Issei for being understanding and apologizing for any trouble that she might have caused, although Issei would assure her that she had done nothing in the sort, and he was happy to help, he guessed. Rias would thank him, giving him a kiss on the cheek as she left with Graphia as they went to attend to other matters, leaving Issei back to his lonesome. He had no idea of what to say or what to think in that moment. Had he done the right thing? Sure, he knew he had, but at the same time, there was still some regret. This was Issei after all. The next morning, Issei was a bit troubled though. He wondered what could have gotten Rias to act this way, or what was keeping her on edge. Of course, both Rachel and Asya would be aware of what happened, and they wondered also. As they arrived to school, Issei would speak to Kiba about the matter. Kiba would theorize that if Graphia were involved, then he had a pretty good idea of what the situation was about, and he wasn't too fond of the idea. As the other members of the House of Grimmery would arrive to the Occult Research Club after school, with Rachel in tow, as she wasn't an official member, but still tagged along and stayed nonetheless. Much to their surprise, the club room would already be occupied. Akano was brewing tea as they had a guest. A young man, dressed in all red, a red tuxedo of sorts, wearing a white collar shirt, loose, and he seemed to be regal and distinguished, as he had his arms around Rias on the couch, and she looked none too pleased to have him there. The young man would introduce himself as Lord Riser Phoenix of the House of Phoenix, and he had come by to see how his fiancée was carrying on. Hearing the word fiancé, well, that explained everything, and also it explained a lot more. Of course, Issei had a mixed feeling about this guy. He looked like a complete douche in every which way, but at the same time, there was a level of gravitas to him. Rias wouldn't want to entertain him much further, eventually pulling away from his grasp and asking why he had stopped by. Riser explained that they had to get their priorities in order. Rias had been stalling for long enough, and he wasn't getting any more patient. Rias explained that if he wanted the title of her house, then she was more than happy to give it to him, but she was not going to hand over her right to choose when it came to marriage. That was something she would decide for herself. However, Riser would inform her that their houses were in a bit of a crucial state. After all, many of the Great Devil families had been lost after the Great War, and they were still replenishing their forces, so much so that they had to even start recruiting humans and turning them into devils just to bolster their ranks. If they were going to have any strong bloodlines going forward, then this marriage had to take place. Now suddenly, it all made sense to Issei. What Rias was talking about, the idea of genuine true love, throwing herself at him, she didn't want to be anywhere near this guy. And this jerk, the way that he talked to her, he didn't even seem like he saw her as a person at all. She was just a tool, a means to an end. It pissed him off. It pissed him off greatly. And the scarab on his back could feed on that anger. This wasn't the anger of something petty or trivial. It was a righteous anger, an anger at the sight of injustice. This was the kind of thing that a scarab could get behind. Of course, Riser in the meantime wasn't one for dealing with insolence, as he grabbed Rias aggressively by the arm, making it very clear he wasn't going to take no for an answer. Graphia would arrive instantly, introducing herself as the servant of Sir Zex, the Devil King, and Sir Zex, being Rias' older brother, had been the one to talk about the arrangements for the marriage, and she was overseer of the situation, to make sure that no violence took place. Riser even admitted that at the sight of the Ultimate Queen, even he had to bow in respect. However, Riser made it very clear that he wasn't going to be leaving without getting what he had come for, as he introduced his full set, the House of Phoenix, among them being his sister, who was taking the place of one of his bishops. He explained that he had the overwhelming advantage, and if it came down to a rating game, then it was going to be in his favor. Issei would ask what the rating game was, and Kiba briefly explained that it was a contest held amongst the devils. It was why they had the evil peace system, based off of chess. Essentially, it was a matchup between households, like a game of chess, and they were the pieces on the board, or battlefield so to speak. And the simple fact of the matter was that Rias was inexperienced, had never competed in a raiding game herself, and she had an incomplete set, while Riser, competing in many raiding games, had the distinct privilege of being seen as one of their top competitors. In fact, the few battles he had actually lost, it was rumored he only lost them on purpose to try to curry favor with the House of Gremory. Of course, Rias was all too familiar with this. It was something she had dealt with her whole life. Men who came around looking for one thing, to make a name for themselves, and often to do so at her expense. They never saw Rias as a person. In fact, she knew all too well that any man she did marry, it was most likely going to be just so that they could gain the title and the privileges that came with being a part of the House of Gremory, and she would be little more than an afterthought. For Issei, he was getting more and more pissed, and Riser could sense the bloodlust as he looked over towards him. "You boy, do you have a problem with Riser?" "Yeah, you're really annoying. I don't really care too much for the high and mighty attitude. You might impress others, but you're not impressing me one bit." "Impress? I have no need to impress the likes of you. I've heard about you, the boy that's possessed by the scarab. Pathetic, if you ask me. It was said that you were once one of the more powerful sacred gears, but to me you're nothing more but an insect that could be squashed under the heel of my shoes." Issei could feel the tingling in his spine as he glared towards Riser. Riser would call over his queen, giving her a deep and passionate kiss as he looked back towards Issei. "I see that look in your eyes, boy. Do you have feelings for Rias, my beautiful red rose?" "Well, it's only natural. A lowlife, a piece of scum. They always wish to have the finer things. Well, let me fill you in on a little secret. You're better off dealing with the gutter trash, because as a collector of fine things myself, it would be wrong of me to let a beautiful Picasso be in the hands of a commoner. Do the poor get to eat with the rich? Can the inexperienced truly dine with the cultured and the classed? I think not. You can pine after her all you want, but she will never be yours, because you are beneath me. You will never have what I have, and you will never be what I am. And once more, that power of yours is nothing to be proud of. I've seen far more better. And besides, what good is a warrior to a dead goddess?" Immediately, Issei would rush towards Riser. Riser would snap his fingers for his two pawns to try to subdue him. However, the tide of battle would turn, as instantly the two pawns would be knocked to the ground. As Riser raised his fist, igniting a flame, Issei held up his arm that sprouted a cannon, the two beams ready to blast. However, Issei had gotten there just a bit faster, and his beam was pointed directly at Riser's chest. "Issei!" Rias would yell, hoping that he would calm down. "You can say anything you want about me. Look down on me. Call me a weakling. I don't really care. I don't give a damn about your class, your status, your money. You don't impress me one bit. But the one thing I won't tolerate is disrespect towards my master." as Issei looked towards Riser, his eyes glowing a deep and dark blue. "If you ever disrespect my master or my goddess ever again, you won't have to wait for a response. And I promise you, I won't hold back. You insolent. Riser, that's enough. You're going to stand for this. No wonder your brother has no faith in you if you can't keep your own household in check. Riser, if you wish to fight, you'll get one. And I promise you, you'll have no mercy from me." Graphia would step between them, as it seemed as though the challenge for the raiding game had been accepted. You're making a foolish decision, my love. This will not end well for you. For too long, you've been going rogue, making your own decisions. First, you have servants you can't keep in line, and you associate yourself with that one, as he glared towards Rachel. Do not think that you are safe. Even if I have no personal beef with you, I cannot say the same for all within the stat of the underworld. I'd best watch where you step, young one. Because the moment that you are out of the kinship of the Grimoires, it would be unfortunate if an accident were to befall someone such as yourself. Issei was already losing more and more patience, and he felt the itch to pull the trigger. However, Rias would place her hand on his arm, calming him down, assuring him that he would get his chance. She agreed to the raiding game. Both sides would be given the time and the date, and the arrangements would be made. As Riser and his household would leave, Rias would turn back to her own. Issei, she had shown her something. He had the guts and the resolve, and the fact that he had gotten so worked up in anger on her behalf. How could she not respond to that feeling? If she wanted her own life, then she would have to fight for it, and everyone was willing to stand with her. As Rias and their household would look in anticipation, they knew that preparations would need to be made, as the battle between the House of Grimoire and the House of Phoenix loomed on the horizon. With everything to lose and everything to gain, Issei would find himself in the fight of his life, and the time to step up to the next level was now. This concludes Highschool DxD Fallen Hero. What if Issei was the Blue Beetle? Season 1, Part 3. As always, if you enjoyed today's video and everything else that we have to offer, then please don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, share, and hit that bell for post notifications so you can stay up to date on everything that is PowerCore Productions and Podcastings that has to come out now and in the future. Stay tuned for tomorrow's video as we continue Date Alive Flash in Time. What if Shido was the Flash? Season 1, Part 3. But anyway, that's going to do it for the end of today's video. I'm Javon Harrington with PowerCore Productions and Podcastings. Signing off, and I'll see you next time.